Hey, this is Annex, and today I wanted to make a little tutorial about a kick. And it's not going to be like, yeah, make this Cepha kick in 5 minutes, whatever. You can find that everywhere. But I'm going to go over more of the structure of a kick and kind of the theory behind that and how that relates to bars and also the effects that you choose to put on each of the sections of the kick. Because when I was learning, and I'm still learning, but I didn't find anything that really made sense from a theory point of view. So I went and looked into this a bit, and I think this makes a lot more sense to me. So I hope it helps you to understand the kick better. And the reason why I like doing this is because then I can be more conscious to make very specific changes when I'm making my kick and like troubleshoot a little better. So not just like turning knobs randomly until something sounds good. Because if I do that, A, I'll be deaf, and B, yeah, I won't be able to hear the results by the time I'm done. And usually I don't have a very good success rate. So anyway, that's why I like to think about the theory behind this stuff. And I hope it helps you a bit. So I'm not going to be using my push today. I'm still going to be working in Ableton, but it's not specific to Ableton, this tutorial. Okay, so first let's see how a Frenchcore kick works. So I'm going to be talking about Frenchcore kick. It's equally the same as a hardcore kick, just the BPM is different. Well, there's some other differences, but for the structure and theory point of view, it's pretty much the same. It's not so applicable to like other slower EDM kicks, but maybe this helps you with like notes and timing when you're thinking about where your kick sits with respect to your beats and your loops and things like that. Okay, so let's open a Frenchcore kick. This is one from Dr. Peacock, and it's probably going to be way too loud. That was all the kicks. Okay, so you get the idea. So when we look at it here, it's in the session view of Ableton, obviously, and this kick is warped. So that means that we have the kick, the waveforms of the kick, it's in stereo, so that's why we see one waveform here and one waveform at the bottom. If it were in mono, we would only see one of those, so like together in the middle. So it's warped because it's over a number of bars, or you can keep track of it according to bars, and bars are these increments that you see on top. So in the MIDI clip here where my cursor is, if I were to unwarp it, then we see it according to milliseconds. And the milliseconds are important because you use them to calculate the bar length of your kick, depending on what your BPM is. So this kick, you see, it doesn't change. It doesn't get longer or shorter, depending on whether I warp it or not, because I know it's already in 200 beats per minute. If it were like faster than 200 beats per minute, then I would have to pull it back this way to shorten it. And if it was slower, then I would pull it up this way to make it longer. When you do that, the pitch can change, especially if you're using other programs. But in Ableton, if you use like tones, it's pretty nice for kicks. When you're warping them, if you're like bringing in a kick from somewhere else, or if you're using one of your kicks like in a MIDI instrument, which is what I would like to do. If you like pull in a kick and then it sounds horrible, check to see that Ableton didn't warp it for you, and if it did warp it, see which way it warped it, because if you use like Complex and Complex Pro, it can sound really, really bad sometimes. Okay, so we heard that kick. We know obviously this is one kick. It was looping, but that's one kick. So that's like every time I press it, it goes. Just to take you over to the session view. So this is probably what you're more used to seeing. So here's that one kick that we have. Arrangement view. So arrangement view, we're looking over time. So that's how you see the milliseconds on this bottom axis here, and you see the bars on top here. So this is the kick we just saw, but in arrangement. So because we're 4/4 time signature, like most electronic dance music, we know there's going to be 4 kicks per bar, because there's 4 beats per one bar, and one kick is one quarter notes, which is what I'll be talking about more. So we see this is one kick, and then we just duplicate it. So I'm going Control D on my computer keyboard, just my regular keyboard, and it puts it out 4 times. And then you have this 1 bar. So from bar 1 to bar 2, that's 1 bar length, and you have 4 kicks in it. So if I played that out, it would sound the same as if we were playing in session view, just it would stop. Okay, good. So now that you saw that, we're gonna go back and look at the kick here. So again, I went back to the session view, so I'm just using my like tab button on my regular keyboard to do this. And when we look at the kick, there's a few different segments to it. So I'm going to break it down into 3 different chunks. Yeah, other people can think about this differently. This is just the way that helped me to understand it and work with it. So first, the kick itself is, I'm going to take this warp off, it's 300 milliseconds. And trust me, it is 300 milliseconds, just doesn't look exactly like that. Or maybe it is a little off. It's 1.97 beats per minute off. Anyway, let's pretend it's exactly on the 300 millisecond point here. So what that means is that because our time signature is 200 beats per minute, we want to calculate that out to, milliseconds, and then time the beats per millisecond. But basically, what matters to you now is there's 3 parts of the kick. So we have the talk, which is the first part. So that's like the really like sub, like the first hitch you hear, that's on the left-hand side. And it also has a click on top of it. So there's a sub in the click, in the talk, and we can also call it like the attack. And then you have the middle to it, like literally just the middle part here. And this is important in like Frenchcore and hardcore music because it's really what gives the kick its oomph. In other genres, like the kick isn't necessarily connected to the bass, but in hardcore and especially Frenchcore, it is. So that's why you hear like this kick and bass over the whole, quarter bar. So you hear it all the time over the refrain, basically, and that's what gives it so much energy. And then here, so the last part, so this right-hand side, we have the tail, or like the high end of the kick. And this is where you have higher frequencies and you can do some phasing, and more interesting effects and stuff can go onto this right-hand side. So we still add some effects to the lower parts, but it can really mess up things with a ripple effect if we make it really confused or do something wrong on the bottom half, so on like the talk and the attack, then it can really like influence the right hand side, because all these waveforms and these layers of sounds and the sound waves influence each other. And so when they intersect the wrong way, in a way we don't want them to intersect, then they're going to throw everything else off also that comes behind it. So to avoid that, we want to think about our kick in the 3 different sections and how to section them off. So make sure they're distinct from each other and make them complementary. So after you do that, apply the effects and then glue it together. So you have like obviously one kick and not this 3-part random thing. Okay, so the first part we'll talk about is the talk, and it goes to say 75 milliseconds here. So it's between 70 and 80 milliseconds. This is nice. So milliseconds are thousandths of a second. So it's not like divided by 60 like minutes or hours is. It's a lot easier to work with. So this 070 and this the time on the bottom, you're actually going up to 1,000 and not up to like 60 or whatever anymore. Okay, so we know our talk is on the left hand side there, and just taking a look at this example. So using this VST called Kick 2, which is really nice. So it provides you with a number of talks that you can choose from. So even though in hardcore the kicks are pretty heavy, they usually use a normal like EDM talk. And that's because you want it to be pretty clean. because you really want the bass to hit hard, and you want to have more of the like cool effects coming later. And that's also so you have a difference between the bass and the more distorted, like saturated audio effects that come on the higher ends. So then you just don't hear like bass, 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 because then it's not going to be exciting anymore. It's not going to be dynamic. So yeah, we can use like trance or house, or even like analog talks like 808 or 909. I think 808 is also nice for like heartbeats. I think Anger Fist uses that a lot. Okay, so let's use just say like some Psy talk. So here we see like, it's basically a normal kick if you're not doing hardcore or Frenchcore or hardstyle. So here we have the bars on the bottom. So it's not based on time, it's based on bars. Ignore this time here. So it goes a little more over 1.1.4 bars. So for that to mean anything to us, we have to remember like how our kick looks according to time. So if we go back to this example, so we have and I'm gonna draw this for you, but then I also made an image of it, and you can download the image of it from my website, and I'll put a link to that. So on the bottom you have like, you're starting at 0 milliseconds and you're going all the way to 300 milliseconds. And we know that that is, a quarter note basically, because each of our kicks equals a quarter note. And then again, okay, so we have 0 milliseconds and we start that on 1.1, it's the same as 1.1.1 bars, if we're translating it to bars. And then here it's 1.2.1 bars. Oops. The diagram on the website is going to be a lot easier to read than this, but this way I can at least show you like step by step. Okay, so we want to divide that in half, and this is also why I use 200 beats per minute, because you divide it by half really easily into nice round numbers, and I don't have to do complicated math. So this divided by 2, it's 150 milliseconds. And so what's a half note, or sorry, a quarter note divided by 2 is just a half note. Wait, an eighth note. Half of a quarter note is an eighth note. So you go 1.4 times, 1/4 times 1/2, and you get 1/8, basically. And this is going to be 1.1.3 bars. And here is going to be 1.1.4 bars. And here is going to be 1.1.2 bars. So with these bars, you still keep counting up in fours. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, the same as you would go 4 kicks in one loop. It's the same idea, just in these smaller increments here. Okay, so we're gonna find out what's half of this again to find our other nice note length increment. So 150 milliseconds divided by 2 is 75 milliseconds. And that goes here, and we're just gonna draw a line up, and then the note length that corresponds to that is an eighth note divided by 2, so it's a 16th note. Because it's 1/8 times 1/2 is 1/16. And we're going to do that one more time. We're going to divide that by 2. And 75 divided by 2 is 37.5. And again, we want to find the note. So what's 1/16 times 1/2? And it's 1/32. So that's our 32nd of a note. 32nd of a note. Okay. Anyway, if you can't understand it now, look at the diagram later on the website. This is just to walk you through it. Okay, so why does this matter? So this is gonna form our kick. If you think about the kick as like a box. So basically the same as like this box you see on the session view, like that's our kick. And we want to break it down into segments again because we have three distinct parts I'm going to talk about. So we already talked about the talk, and yeah, you can also call it the attack. And let's use this one, or maybe use this one instead. So this is the kick I used in one of my songs. Okay, let's go here first because it shows you in bars. Okay, so say we're going to use this psytrance kick. It's nice and clean and has like a nice click to it. So we want to say, where does this actually appear in our space here? So if you look up on the screen, the length is a little over 1.1.4 bars. So that means that if you put this kick, if you use this kick, it's going to go all the way up to here in your kick. And I'm just going to draw that for you and hope I don't make mistakes because I'm using a very permanent marker. Okay, so this is the space that talk would take up if you didn't cut it off to make room for the other sections. So I'm going to call this talk or attack. Okay, so that is our first part of the kick that we think about. And the next part we're going to look at is the middle part. So the middle parts goes, for example, from like, it starts at the beginning. The way I add it is this way. So each of these MIDI clips, this is a quarter note here. So this actually covers the whole space of the kick. So this mid section is going to start at the beginning and it's going to go up to say like here or so. Mids. And so this talk that I have here is not with kick 2, but it's the same idea as kick 2. So this would be just like I could pull in this instrument and work on it instead of this. These three columns here, so ignore this one for now. These three columns are going to correspond to the three parts of my kick. So we have the talk here, we have the mid that I just sketched in, and then we have the high, or the tail of the kick, more people call it. So these three parts of the kick kind of correspond to the three tracks here that I have. And in Ableton, you can group tracks within tracks within tracks. So that's why I have them all together here, and then I have them grouped as a kick. So then I can kind of master the kick using this main track. Okay, so for the mid, this talk, so I pulled in an instrument called a sampler. It's not the simpler because I wanted to use it so it didn't pitch. Because this talk or attack, it shouldn't have a really significant note to it. And I want it to be more or less atonal except for the click on top of it. And when I do have changes in my bass line, I don't want it to change. So in Frenchcore, the bass line is going to change according to which chord we want to use, but the talk should stay the same. And that's why if you hear, so when I play it like this, okay, so we're hearing all the same thing because I pulled it into a sampler and I put the scale onto 0%. And that means it won't pitch it at all. This is the only thing I like the sampler for. Otherwise, I usually use the simpler, which I talked about in another tutorial. Okay, so the mid and the high, I use a Serum wavetable. And Serum is quite nice to do like really crunchy, thick and excited things. So I won't go over that because there's a lot of other tutorials on that. But I basically have the same or very similar yeah, wave table set up through Serum for my mid and my high. And why does that matter? So I'm going to show you the overlap between these different parts, and then how we kind of reduce that overlap and give everything its own space in the kick. So say the talk goes this way. The mid goes this way. And the high goes this way. And actually, for the way I do it, so I start this high, I start this tail, like right in the middle here. So for me, yeah, I'm gonna just move that a little bit closer in time. So if you see here, the tail here, so this is how I set my tail up. So this is 1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 2 bars. So this would be my 1 bar loop here. That sounds horrible. And I'm gonna start playing it at like halfway through that. So this is at that 1.1.3 mark, like that's on the diagram I showed you. So that's where my high actually starts. That's why I didn't like put it all the way up here. And I can do that because I don't need this to really have bass. I just need it to add some like fun, exciting, distorted stuff, but not the body of the kick. So the body of the kick is going to be like in the first like half, 3/4 more. Okay, so those are the 3 main sections of the kick, and I'll just briefly go over how we can separate them. So on this first track, the effects I have a high frequency pass, which is nice if I want to slowly take out the talk and just like move up, so we have more and more bass and then nothing. I have a low frequency operator, and this one is nice. It comes with Serum. So this is how I'm going to shape the talk. So this like bar, this whole thing, this goes over 1/4 of a bar. I'll just show you how it looks when I play it. So with each beat, like, oh, that shouldn't be. Get rid of that. So with each beat that's going, this goes through 1. So think about this like LFO screen is basically the same as our kick. It goes over a 1/4 of a bar, so 1 kick duration. What I'm doing here is I'm letting, this is in gain, so in like, decibels, but it's the envelope. So it's depending, how much volume, so how much gain comes out of this according to where it is over time, so over your bars and over the point that you're in with the kick. So here I'm stopping it at about, here, so maybe like, I don't know what that is, maybe like 45 seconds or something. I start to stop it, and then I cut it off at this 75 milliseconds, because this is 1/4 of the way across. So it's easier to keep track of this if you just think, okay, what's half, and what's half of that? And then you just use these guidelines for you. So this means that the talk, we're only going to hear up to this 1/4 mark here. And I have something else on there, but if usually when you pull that over, you would hear more like the tail end of this talk, which we don't want to hear. Okay, so that's how we shape that. In the next tutorial, I'm going to go over these other effects I have on, but right now it's not important. So then how do we shape the mid? So again, I'm going to use a LFO. So here I have together like an LFO, and I also have a sidechain compression, and you can do like complementary things with both of those. So here we're letting in, so I start this right at the beginning, so right at 0 milliseconds, and it's going until, do this for you so it's the same. So we're just looking at this one kick here. So this is like what you're seeing here. I'm gonna solo that. And you hear it go like kind of up and down, up and down, up and down, in part because I have this low frequency operator set up this way. So we can also like draw an envelope here, not with that, but with like, yeah, this point. So this is gonna be, well, if I were using multiple points here, we could be able to draw this, but then I would have to map these 3 different points on here. But you get the idea, like we could draw an envelope like this, and it's equivalent to what we're shaping with the VST here. So this means it's going to start coming in a little bit before, or start cutting off a little bit before the halfway mark, and it's going to go at this angle right until it hits like the, yeah, should be here, like the 3/4 mark, and then we only hear the high. And this sidechain compression that goes after it, so this means we take in the talk, so we take in the attack as an input, and whenever that triggers, so whenever this talk is playing, we're not going to hear this middle part because we're squishing it down as long as this is playing. And we do this so if we don't do this, then we're going to have like all this stuff overlapping with each other, and it's just going to clash and sound like not very good. So when we have the talk as an input, we can control for that. And this is why it's pumping. This is how you make basically all EDM music pump. If it's all the way to the bottom, you don't hear the middle at all. And if it's up here, you don't really hear the pumping at all, which you do because I have that low frequency operator. When it clicks like that, it means that it needs a little longer release, a longer later attack or a longer release, or the knee is too sharp. I also like to use the Fab filter compressor because you can adjust the look ahead, so you can tell it to predict or to know in advance before these clicks come, so it can accommodate for that. But I don't think the Ableton one can do that. So basically what you're saying is, what you're seeing is here. So this is the compressor that's triggering every time this talk plays. Now you hear like the pumping stuff. Great. So that sounds okay, whatever, but it's not a full kick still. Oh yeah, just one more thing. So this release, it goes up to, so this starts at 0. So this compressor is going to start right when the kick starts, when the attack is beginning, and it's going to stop going at 37.5 milliseconds. So this one actually stops here, if you see. So it's only compressing and getting rid of this part of the mid, so only like the first stuff, so it doesn't mess up with the most bass stuff, if that makes sense. Okay, so we sidechained compress and we added an LFO on our mids, and that's other stuff. And then on the high ends, I have done something similar. So I also sidechain compressed the high in the same way we did at the mid, but I did the high with an input from the mid. So this would mean anytime, so forget about the talk for a second, anytime the middle is playing now, and the high would be playing, so it would be like over here, because remember we started it in the middle here at the halfway points. So whenever this is playing, this is not going to be playing because we want to reduce this overlap if it sounds bad. So let's see what this does, if this sounds like anything. Okay, so it's kind of like some reverse bass thing. Yeah, usually it sounds really bad when you go really short. Okay, so anyway, that's compressing the high with the mid. You can also set up an LFO to do something similar, but it's not worth it this time. So this is basically saying it's just the exact same as what we're making it do with the MIDI, because the MIDI note, remember, it only started halfway through here. So this is basically the same. The LFO is doing the same as what the MIDI trigger is in the clip. So if we had it on now, it'd be redundant. Yeah, so that is how I set up the 3 parts of the kick, and also how you can break them down into milliseconds and bars. There's sheets on my website where you can calculate going from your BPM to the different bar lengths, and I'll use that in another tutorial actually, because then I can talk about it also with respect to the release, decay and release calculators for things like reverb. And yeah, I hope this tutorial helps you a bit. I'll just go on my main here. Yeah, so I don't have any wave shapers on my main group for the kick. One thing that I did try using was this. So in the new Fab Filter, they have like automated envelopes that you can use, but basically we already did this. So what this is trying to do is when the kick starts, so when the talk starts, it's accentuating that sound, and when the tail starts, it's accentuating that sound, and it's taking the gain of the other part the opposite way. But this is the same as what we did with sidechain compression to get these parts out of the way. Yeah, I hope that explained it more or less clearly to you. If you have any questions, still let me know in the comments, and I'll probably do this tutorial again in a little while, and yeah, then we can see what you guys want to learn more or different about in this approach, because I think it's pretty important to understand this stuff. Okay, thanks.